It's very rare in politics that the person that goes before you is literally that popular with the electorate that they become the Prime Minister. And I think that's a really special moment for Greater Manchester. And I'll be using that leverage of having Andy in number 10 to be able to get the best deal. And we've seen it already with some of the conversations that have been had around devolution. I was locked in a room waiting for the results of my count, and already the Prime Minister was talking about devolving power out of Westminster, talking about the kinds of things that we've been banging the drum for a very, very long time around devolution. So it's a really positive moment, I think, for mayors and a very special moment for Greater Manchester.
It is just over a week now since Bev Craig became the second mayor of Greater Manchester, Labour mayor, of course, succeeding Andy Burnham. And Bev Craig joins us now. Hello to you.
Morning.
It's very kind of you to speak to us. We're excited about it. You haven't done that many interviews. Does that sort of herald the fact that you're going to be a rather different style of mayor from Andy Burnham?
I think it heralds the fact that 6 days into the job, I've been focused on getting stuff done. So don't worry, I will be up for interviews, but I'm definitely a person that wants to have delivered something before I come and tell you about it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But, I mean, obviously he had previously been a cabinet minister. He, if you like, had a national profile. Do mayors these days have a national profile, or is it just the area that they're representing?
So I think it's important that you do have a national profile because of how this country works. And my job will obviously be to bring more power and control and get more positive things for our region. So I think it is important that we as mayors use our profile. But I think recognising that ultimately it's what the people of Greater Manchester feel, what they think and the success that they see that gets us re-elected.
Because of the circumstances, obviously, of Andy Burnham having been mayor there and also moving number 10 north to Manchester, do you think Manchester's going to have a sort of special in, if you like, with the national government?
So look, I've been in big trouble with many of my mayoral colleagues across the country if I said that Greater Manchester was going to get special treatment. But look, it's very rare in politics that the person that goes before you is literally that popular with the electorate that they become the Prime Minister. And I think that's a really special moment for Greater Manchester. And I'll be using that leverage of having Andy in number 10 to be able to get the best deal. And we've seen it already with some of the conversations that have been had around devolution. I was locked in a room waiting for the results of my count, and already the Prime Minister was talking about devolving power out of Westminster, talking about the kinds of things that we've been banging the drum for a very, very long time around devolution. So it's a really positive moment, I think, for mayors and a very special moment for Greater Manchester.
In due course, you are going to be given a percentage of tax revenues, which previously would go to the Treasury and then be passed back. How are you planning on using that freedom?
So I think income tax is a really interesting way, but alongside business rates, of moving the conversation on around fiscal devolution. And I think if you look at Greater Manchester's success, economic success over the last decade, it feels counterintuitive that government haven't been giving us a share of some of the growth to help us continue that growth. So growing our tax base, both for business rates and income tax, for me, helps us fund things like the necessary infrastructure, the homes that we need to build, the revitalisation of our high streets. And sure, I'll wait to see what the detail of the specifics are, but we're already utilising business rates in Greater Manchester in a way that has proven you can get growth. And I think letting other regions do that hopefully will unlock their regions to see some of the levels of growth that we've seen.
I mean, government in a lot of areas, and we've already seen it from Andy Burnham, want to cut taxes to stimulate growth in the economy. But Ben Houchen says that he might decide to use some of that tax revenue to cut taxes in his area. I mean, he's right, isn't it? Having that power, that's the only way true devolution would work.
Absolutely. And I think, that's always going to be the test of anyone in government. Are they prepared to give power away to people if they might choose to do something differently with it? And I think there's different examples. And, I'll be interested to talk to Ben around what he's thinking in his area. But if you look at what we've already been doing, for example, in Greater Manchester, where we have been utilising our business rates growth at times to stimulate bits of the economy that were struggling. And so it doesn't have to be carte blanche tax breaks for everyone, but you can use things in a way that attract and stimulate creating jobs for local people.
So you would support him in saying that, not that you would necessarily, but that mayors should have the option of being able to use the money they receive to effectively give tax rebates to people, would you?
So I don't think that's what government are suggesting, and I'll be really interested to see in the
No,
months.
it's certainly not worth suggesting, but I just wonder if that would be a good idea if you believe, as you strongly do, in devolution.
I think it depends what's devolved, and what I'm saying is that I don't think, from what I've read of government's intention, that that's the kind of tax mechanisms they're thinking of devolving that would mean you would be able to give rebates away. But I'll be interested to see in how the detail works. From our experience in Greater Manchester with business rates retention, it's helped fund infrastructure, it's helped attract jobs, and it's helped make a creative and interesting place for companies to come and locate here. That's the kind of thing that I read into government as to what they're suggesting in terms of fiscal devolution.
Mr. Burnham is saying that he very much wants to focus on the cost of living. What can you do at council level to ease the burden on people?
So I think the Prime Minister is absolutely right. You know, across the country, I don't think it really matters your income bracket. People are really feeling the pinch. And I think there is this real sense in many of our communities that this old adage of work hard, do the right thing, and life will automatically get better isn't there. It's one of the reasons that I've led, for example, with the policy of free bus travel for 11 to 18-year-olds. We already did it for 16 to 18-year-olds, but that puts £500 in the pocket of a family per child by simply allowing their children to go on the bus. And I think it's levers like that, when it can be funded within the existing system, that mayors can achieve. But I would also say I'm planning a cost of living summit in the autumn, where I'm convening businesses together with voluntary and community sectors to see what more we can do. Because the reality is councils, mayors, combined authorities are very, very reliant on national measures to help alleviate some of this. But there are some things we can do, and that's what we're getting on with doing.
So that's a national meeting, is it, with all the mayors from around?
No, that'll be a Greater Manchester wide, and that will be utilising, for example, financial institutions that are built here, have a cost of living task force that will sit around it. And that's really testing. Are we doing absolutely everything that we can to make life better, cheaper, easier and simpler for our residents?
The reality, though, looking at the national picture, is that, you know, we are increasing our debt, that something's got to give within public spending. Where do you see the possible reductions in public spending coming?
So I think from my perspective, you know, we've had a stagnant economy in the UK for quite some time now. We're outmatched when it comes to so many of our peers across the Western world. And you look at regional inequality and the gap between many of our regions in London, and we are an outlier within OECD countries. So I think from my perspective, there is an opportunity done in the right way to stimulate further growth by investment in infrastructure. And I would be encouraging the Prime Minister to think very carefully and cleverly as he moves into the budget around how we can stimulate growth in the short term whilst planning for the long term. And I don't think we've done enough of that in this country. And it's been really quite welcoming to see some of that talk around long-term infrastructure investment in homes, in transport, starting to pay off. And we've seen that with some of the procurement changes that came through last week, where we're talking more about how do we create the jobs that we need in this country to help get people into well-paid work.
Do you think that those investments can actually, I mean, you say short term, but they're going to take a time to come through. I mean, can they actually prevent, you know, hard choices such as, for example, lifting the triple lock on pension rises?
Yeah, look, I think I'm never going to be, you know, going on a national platform and saying spend, spend, spend. You know, we have to be responsible to spend within our means in this country. But put really simply, the economy isn't working on the basis of the decisions that have been taken over the last 10 to 15 years. Going back even further than that, we do need to look to different ways to stimulate growth. And I do think there are opportunities within infrastructure investment, but I also think many of the ways that the state spends is ineffective. So one of the reasons that we're pitching for more control in Greater Manchester over the post-16 skills system, over the out of work support that DWP currently spend trying to get people into work, is saying that there's a different way, that unlocking the state can do this differently and save money, because we can't continue with the bills that we have, particularly when it comes to out of work costs.
Some councils in London have announced that they're not going to implement the ECHR guidance coming out of the Supreme Court ruling on trans issues. What is your policy in Greater Manchester?
So I've not yet spoken to the 10 councils within Greater Manchester about the approach that they're taking, so wouldn't be here to speak on their behalf. All I would say at this point, is that the role of mayor is, of course, to respect the law, and I'll be sitting down later on this week to see what it means in terms of our organisation, in terms of the police and others. I would just say, and my position, is really firmly on the record, that there is a way of having these conversations, that you can, of course, protect women's rights under the Equality Act, as I have done throughout my career, and still give dignity to the conversation we're talking about trans communities. And I see it as my job as the mayor for everyone in Greater Manchester to navigate a way through that doesn't lean into culture wars, that keeps people safe and brings a bit of dignity to the conversation.
Do you believe you can do it within the guidance? Because that seems to be the issue.
And I think it will be for the 10 councils to decide how they wish to approach that. I think it's very different for a combined authority in terms of the kinds of services that I would be in charge of. But I do know there are many that have raised some concerns about the practical implication. And we've seen that, for example, with some of the NHS guidelines that have come through. And I think there is a period of time for a lot of our bodies to work through how they would seek to implement what is effective.
I mean, it's been a long time already. It was a long time getting the guidance. I mean, are you saying that your advice to the town councils under your responsibility is that they should implement the guidance in full?
What I'm saying is I haven't spoken to them about it, and I want to maintain the approach that Andy took as mayor, where we work together collectively and we sit in the same position, and we haven't had a chance to discuss it yet, so I couldn't possibly speak on behalf of where the local councils, their heads are thinking.
But in as much as it affects your jurisdiction, you are going to see the full imposition of those guidelines. Is that right?
As I say, I'm working through what that guidance means in terms of the transport services that I am in control of, in terms
with
of...
the intention of implementing it?
Well, with the intention of understanding what would be different to what we do now, because actually many of our services are compliant. And I think the reality is in transport services, we're probably talking here about a handful of public toilets. Am I, as the mayor, going to be checking people's bits on the way into the toilet? Absolutely not. So there's some nuances to work through. But in terms of the services that I run, I'm just really keen that we have this conversation with a bit of dignity, a bit of common sense, of course being legally compliant, but doing it in a humane way.
And finally, Number 10 North has been established in temporary premises. The full office is not expected to 2032. Andy Burnham could be out of power by then. Are you going to speed it up?
I mean, I'm not building it myself, so I'd love to speed it up if I could. The reality is, I think that we're talking about the permanent building as part of a long-term cluster. Something as leader of the council I was really proud to brought to Greater Manchester, the Manchester Digital Campus. It creates 8,000 cyber and digital jobs. I'd be really excited if they could build that quicker. That would be a government contract, and we'll be encouraging them to move as quickly as they can. But I would say, irrespective of where the building is, like Number 10 in the north has been a really fascinating example of how people suddenly are turning their eyes to what we've been doing in Greater Manchester. And I think that gives us a real opportunity to share some of the things that have worked, to talk even more about devolution, but also to have a genuine conversation around how we close some of those regional disparities when it comes to economic growth in the north of England. So irrespective of where they're based, I think it's great that we finally got people in the north of England coming to look at what we're doing and saying how we can improve our areas.
Bev Craig, new Mayor Greater Manchester, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio.
Thank you.